But the sound of the clock had not died away when Germain announced, His Excellency the Count of Monte Cristo. The involuntary start everyone gave proved how much Mercer's narrative had impressed them, and Albert himself could not wholly refrain from manifesting sudden emotion. He had not heard a carriage stop in the street, or steps in the antechamber. The door had itself opened noiselessly. The Count appeared, dressed with the greatest simplicity, but the most fastidious dandy could have found nothing to cavil at in his toilet. Every article of dress, hat, coat, gloves, and boots, was from the first makers. He seemed scarcely 35. But what struck everybody was his extreme resemblance to the portrait Debray had drawn. The Count advanced, smiling, into the center of the room, and approached Albert, who hastened towards him holding out his hand in a ceremonial manner. Punctuality, said Monte Cristo, is the politeness of kings, according to one of your sovereigns, I think, but it is not the same with travelers. However, I hope you will excuse the 2 or 3 seconds I am behindhand. 500 leagues are not to be accomplished without some trouble, and especially in France, where, it seems, it is forbidden to beat the postilions. My dear Count, replied Albert, I was announcing your visit to some of my friends, whom I had invited in consequence of the promise you did me the honor to make, and whom I now present to you. They are the Count of Château Renaud, whose nobility goes back to the 12 peers, and whose ancestors had a place at the Round Table, M. Lucien Debray, private secretary to the Minister of the Interior, M. Beauchamp, an editor of a paper, and the terror of the French government, but of whom, in spite of his national celebrity, you perhaps have not heard in Italy, since his paper is prohibited there, and M. Maximilien Morel, captain of Spy. At this name the Count, who had hitherto saluted every one with courtesy, but at the same time with coldness and formality, stepped a pace forward, and a slight tinge of red colored his pale cheeks. You wear the uniform of the new French conquerors, monsieur, said he. It is a handsome uniform. No one could have said what caused the Count's voice to vibrate so deeply, and what made his eye flash, which was in general so clear, lustrous, and limpid when he pleased. You have never seen our Africans, Count? Said Albert. Never, replied the Count, who was by this time perfectly master of himself again. Well, beneath this uniform beats one of the bravest and noblest hearts in the whole army. Oh, M. de Mercer, interrupted Morel. Let me go on, Captain. And we have just heard, continued Albert, of a new deed of his, and so heroic a one, that, although I have seen him today for the first time, I request you to allow me to introduce him as my friend. At these words it was still possible to observe in Monte Cristo the concentrated look, changing color, and slight trembling of the eyelid that show emotion. Ah, you have a noble heart, said the Count, so much the better. This exclamation, which corresponded to the Count's own thought rather than to what Albert was saying, surprised everybody, and especially Morel, who looked at Monte Cristo with wonder. But, at the same time, the intonation was so soft that, however strange the speech might seem, it was impossible to be offended at it. Why should he doubt it? Said Beauchamp to Chateau Renaud. In reality, replied the latter, who, with his aristocratic glance and his knowledge of the world, had penetrated at once all that was penetrable in Monte Cristo, Albert has not deceived us, for the Count is a most singular being. What say you, Morel? Ma foi, he has an open look about him that pleases me, in spite of the singular remark he has made about me. Gentlemen, said Albert, Germain informs me that breakfast is ready. My dear Count, allow me to show you the way. They passed silently into the breakfast room, and every one took his place. Gentlemen, said the Count, seating himself, permit me to make a confession which must form my excuse for any improprieties I may commit. I am a stranger, and a stranger to such a degree, that this is the first time I have ever been at Paris. The French way of living is utterly unknown to me, and up to the present time I have followed the Eastern customs, which are entirely in contrast to the Parisian. I beg you, therefore, to excuse if you find anything in me too Turkish, too Italian, or too Arabian. Now, then, let us breakfast. With what an air he says all this, muttered Boche. Decidedly he is a great man. A great man in his own country, added Debray. A great man in every country, M. Debray, said Chateau Renaud. The Count was, it may be remembered, a most temperate guest. Albert remarked this, expressing his fears lest, at the outset, the Parisian mode of life should displease the traveler in the most essential point. My dear Count, said he, I fear one thing, and that is, that the fare of the Rue du Helder is not so much to your taste as that of the Piazza di Spagna. I ought to have consulted you on the point, and have had some dishes prepared expressly. Did you know me better, returned the Count, smiling, you would not give one thought of such a thing for a traveler like myself, who has successively lived on macaroni at Naples, polenta at Milan, alla podrida at Valencia, pillau at Constantinople, carrack in India, and swallows' nests in China. I eat everywhere, and of everything, only I eat but little, and today, that you reproach me with my want of appetite, is my day of appetite, for I have not eaten since yesterday morning. What? Cried all the guests, you have not eaten for 24 hours? No, replied the Count, I was forced to go out of my road to obtain some information near Nîmes, so that I was somewhat late, and therefore I did not choose to stop. And you ate in your carriage? Asked Mercier. No, I slept, as I generally do when I am weary without having the courage to amuse myself, or when I am hungry without feeling inclined to eat. But you can sleep when you please, monsieur? Said Morel. Yes. You have a recipe for it? An infallible one. That would be invaluable to us in Africa, who have not always any food to eat, and rarely anything to drink. Yes, said Monte Cristo, but, unfortunately, a recipe excellent for a man like myself would be very dangerous applied to an army, which might not awake when it was needed. May we inquire what is this recipe? Asked Debray. Oh, yes, returned Monte Cristo, I make no secret of it. It is a mixture of excellent opium, which I fetched myself from Canton in order to have it pure, and the best hashish which grows in the East, that is, between the Tigris and the Euphrates. These two ingredients are mixed in equal proportions, and formed into pills. 10 minutes after one is taken, the effect is produced. Ask Baron Franz d'Epinay, I think he tasted them one day. Yes, replied Mercer, he said something about it to me. But, said Beecham, who, as became a journalist, was very incredulous, you always carry this drug about you? Always,